Hello, I'm Jerry Laws, the editor of Occupational Health and Safety magazine. Welcome to this live presentation, which is titled Onsite Innovations Brings Hearing Conservation In-House for a Major Food and Beverage Company. It is sponsored by SHOEBOX Audiometry. Our speakers are Alexa Goff and Erin Beatty of Onsite Innovations. Alexa is the Occupational Hearing Conservation Business Unit Manager at SHOEBOX Audiometry. She works with some of the most forward-thinking manufacturers and on-site, near-site occupational health care providers in North America. Erin has been a certified athletic trainer for 10 years, but for the past 3 years has worked in occupational health. Her current role focuses on injury prevention and ergonomic programs and occupational health programming, including hearing conservation and respiratory protection. Today, they will discuss advancements in portable tablet audiometry that have helped an American food, snack, and beverage company save costs and time by bringing its occupational hearing conservation program in-house. You can submit a question for our presenters at any time during the presentation, and I will moderate a Q&A session during the final minutes of the webinar. If you experience technical difficulties, click on the Help button located below the slide window, and you will receive technical assistance. Finally, after this session is complete, we will be emailing you a link to the archived version of this webinar so you can view it again or share it with your colleagues. And now, I'll turn it over to Alexa Goff.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us today. We're happy to be here. As a bit of background, I've been with SHOEBOX Audiometry now for just over 2 years. And as part of the OCHealth team, I've spoken to and helped hundreds of clients with their hearing conservation programs. I like to say that we're bringing hearing conservation into the 21st century. Today I'm excited to be joined by one of my current customers, Erin Beatty. Erin and Onsite Innovations are both exceptionally forward-thinking in how they approach each customer program they manage. Erin has led the charge to bringing hearing testing in-house for the client site she currently manages. This particular operation is a large, globally recognized food, snack, and beverage manufacturer. And today, Erin is going to share with us how she managed the transition to in-house testing and what she has learned along the way. We'll start today's presentation by talking about Erin's role, then address some of the challenges that this particular customer site was facing before moving their program in-house, what made it possible to bring their program in-house, and finally the benefits that they have realized as a result. First, though, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Onsite Innovations. Onsite Innovations is a leading provider of on-site occupational health services. For over 10 years now, they have been providing superior healthcare management and wellness services to clients with single sites as well as large multi-site operations. Onsite implements customized solutions that provide services ranging from proactive wellness and ergonomics programs, conservative injury care, as well as aggressive case management. They offer 24/7 availability to meet their clients' unique needs, providing services to companies who have workers' compensation, OSHA recordability, and medical surveillance concerns. They currently operate in over 40 states across the U.S. and are the provider of choice for numerous Fortune 1000 companies. I started working with Erin and Onsite just over a year ago. As mentioned, Erin was managing the hearing conservation program for this customer, but her responsibilities also covered the assessment and treatment of minor injuries, providing injury prevention and ergonomic support, case management, and oversight of the respiratory protection program. I mention this because, like so many of you listening today, hearing conservation was just one piece of the puzzle. Her role encompassed much more than simply hearing testing. So going into this, I knew I wanted to help alleviate some of Erin's workload and make her life just a little simpler, at least so far as hearing testing was concerned. At the time, Erin was bringing a third-party service provider on site for approximately 2.5 days each year to test 200 or so employees that were part of the hearing conservation program at this location. As you can imagine, scheduling 200 or so employees across several 8-hour shifts in less than 3 days was a logistical nightmare. I remember Erin telling me at the time that the scheduling process alone took her roughly 20 hours or so to complete every year. Not exactly a great use of her time, considering hearing conservation is only one part of her role. One of the reasons for the compressed time period was simply the cost of bringing the mobile units on site. When outsourcing your hearing testing to a service provider, they typically will come out in a mobile van outfitted with several sound booths and traditional audiometric equipment, and every hour that they're on site is another billable hour. Those hours, as you know, can add up quickly. But there's also the employee's time that needs to be factored in, and the disruption to the overall business operation of that site. Every minute that an employee is standing in line waiting to have their hearing test in the van is another minute that they're away from the workstation, and these soft costs can add up quickly. Before you know it, you've dramatically increased your budget for annual hearing tests simply due to inefficiencies in your program. So at this point, Erin, I'd like to turn things over to you so that you can elaborate on some of the points that I just mentioned and speak to how you solved these challenges at your current customer site.
Thanks, Alexa. I appreciate you having me join this webinar and a chance to talk about the challenges and the solution that we found to meet those challenges. So as you mentioned, we did have a lot of challenges with the service van. There's the expense of it. It was costly, which is why we only had them out for 2.5 days. That's all we could really justify from a budget standpoint. And so we had to pack, people in during those 2.5 days. So it's very hectic to have them here. We're trying to pull 4 people off the production floor at the same time to get on the van at the same time, which inevitably people would miss their appointment because they weren't keeping track of the time or because there was a problem on the line that, superseded needing to have their hearing tested. Or for whatever reason. This was particularly true for some of our troubleshooting departments like QA and mechanics, where you just never know when they're going to be needed. So that made things definitely difficult. But we also had employees who were really frustrated with the service van system because, we're trying to pack all these things in, and so it would inevitably affect their breaks because we'd have 4 people off the floor at a time, which means there's less people available to relieve during the break times, which, isn't fun for anybody when you want to be able to take your break at your normal time and not have that disrupted. But some other just logistical challenges we had was the only place for us to park the van, because we needed 2 outlets that were outside, was very, very close to some train tracks. So not really the optimal environment that we would like to do hearing testing with our employees. But they also just didn't like being in that really small, cramped space with 3 other people who are, moving and being distracting or coughing or whatever was going on in that environment. It was just not easy for people. So those were some of the big challenges that we faced during the service van time, as well as there's been times where they were late, and they're always willing to accommodate. And we had the situation our last year here where he's like, well, I'll work through my break, but I had set up the time very specifically to make sure we could hit each of our 7 shifts, because we have the traditional first, second, and third shift, but we also have some non-traditional shifts that work 4 on, 4 off, 12-hour days, and those can be really hard to work into the schedule and still get everybody tested in 2.5 days. So ultimately, it was a big challenge and something that they really weren't a fan of before I got here, and so I started looking into different options once I got here. So as I mentioned, the EHS manager who was here when I started wasn't a big fan of the way they were doing things, but it was a challenge to figure out how to bring it in-house. We didn't necessarily have a lot of space to put a hearing test booth or a great place to put one, as well as just challenges there. But two of our sister facilities did have on-site clinics. They are bigger facilities than us, so they do have the traditional setup with an audiometry booth and a traditional audiometer. So, we knew that it was something we could certainly do and bring in-house here. Just how do we go about it when we don't have necessarily the ideal setup for a traditional testing equipment? So I started looking into options, and for a while I just felt stuck, and then I came across SHOEBOX, which I thought could be a good option for us, and that's when I reached out to you, Alexa. The first thing that appealed to us about SHOEBOX is that it's portable. We can bring the test wherever we want to do it. So while I said we didn't necessarily have a great place to set up an audiometry booth, we do have several conference rooms and offices that are not utilized all of the time. So there are places that we can do the test when we need to do them, but we're not taking up space with a big audiometry booth when we're not using it. So because all of our spaces are used at certain times throughout the year. So this really helped minimize the effect that, from a space standpoint, not taking office space away from some of our visitors when they're here. We also felt this would help us minimize time away from the production line. So we don't have to take 4 people off the floor at a time. We don't have to get this done in 2.5 days. We can use the entire year. So that's really great because I can do, one department one week and then switch and do another department another week and make sure we have enough time in between people so we're not trying to coordinate and affect people's 10-minute breaks or their lunch breaks. And people are allowed to get back on the line. And we just don't have the same amount of time away from the line because I can let someone know, hey, I'm running behind, let's push these appointments back, versus when the van's running behind, it's harder to do that. We also really like the fact that this was obviously an OSHA-approved test method. That's something that obviously was essential given that we're in food and beverage manufacturing, and hearing conservation is part of OSHA. So the nice part of having a preset test parameter with SHOEBOX, and that SHOEBOX measures the ambient noise in the room, because it's not, we don't have a perfectly quiet environment anywhere. You don't really have that even in a sound booth most of the time, but we know for certain that we're within the testing parameters with SHOEBOX, which are all great things from a compliance standpoint. So next slide. So how we got started was probably in the spring of 2017 was when I kind of noticed this, and I reached out to you, Alexa, and you came out and just showed us the system, and we decided to go ahead and try to do a trial in the summer. So we had already basically completed most of our service testing, or service van testing at that point. But what was great is that we were able to, one, get feedback from employees shortly after they were tested on the van, just as a reminder for them of what the current system was and what the new system could be. But we also were able to compare the tests and make sure that we weren't going to see a change in people's hearing tests just because we went from one method to another. So in terms of comparing the tests, we saw that everything was comparable. There's always a little bit of change in a person from day to day, but nothing was alarming or concerning to us when we compared the tests. And more importantly, our employees loved the new option. They felt like it was much better, much simpler for them. They enjoyed not having 3 other people around them in a cramped little space. So that's kind of how we got started looking into it. And then you can take the next slide. So at that point, I had to present it to our leadership team to, get approval and make sure that they were comfortable with us making these changes. So, I collected the information from our employees and their positive testimonials, but I also put together a cost comparison of what a traditional audiometry setup would cost us, and also the space cost that it would have for us, and then I put together how much our current method with using the service van cost and how much SHOEBOX would cost us, and showed that we were really saving 30 to 40% during any given year by doing the SHOEBOX method. So not only, and that's just from a cost for a hearing conservation standpoint. That's not including costs for paying overtime in different departments to make sure we could get people off the floor, and those unforeseen costs that we didn't necessarily factor in at that point. So the other thing that was great is that we also saw some challenges with people inevitably missing tests, right? I mentioned that people might not make it, or people were also, sick or took an unexpected vacation during our testing days, and we had to send all of those people off-site to get tested, which is, again, another additional cost. Plus, those people would be off-site for roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours, which is a large amount of time to have them away. And again, we're paying overtime then because they're not even in the building. So we have to have somebody watching the machines and running things and being available as mechanics or QA techs if those people aren't here. So I was able to kind of prove both the cost but the production benefits with SHOEBOX. So next slide. So our leadership team, saw that this was going to really be the best option for us, and we're happy that we found a better method. And so in 2018, this was how we decided we were going to do our hearing tests. And we had to figure out a way to roll it out to our team here. So what I first did was during one of our monthly safety trainings, I announced the change, that we were no longer going to have the service van, and I actually showed a demo video of SHOEBOX to our employees just so they could get a first example of the system and get a first kind of touch with it. And then as each employee came in for testing, I went through and showed them how to do it, and, they caught on very quickly. I was originally worried that we were going to have some issues because we do have a very tenured population of employees. Many of our employees have been here for 25, 30. We have some employees who've been here for over 40 years. So they might not be as familiar with technology as some of our newer, younger employees. But the system is so easy to use that it wasn't an issue. And a great thing that's happened is the new update that happened just over the summer that allows us to do testing in assisted mode. So, if I notice that somebody's having some issues doing the self-administered test, I can just switch it to assisted mode and administer the test for them, and it's a little bit more similar to what they were used to on the van. So once we received the equipment and we rolled out the program to the site, it took us about a month, and now we're performing 30 to 40 tests a week. So this year, because we didn't actually get everything put in place until May, we've been doing a lot of testing over the summer, and out of our 230 employees that we test, we're down to having only about 20 left to do. We like to try to have all testing done by the end of September, so we can do any follow-ups that we need to do during the months of October and November before the holidays hit. And we've been able to do that. But I'm really looking forward to next year and having it for the entire year because we're going to find a little bit better of a system in terms of probably doing people's tests during the month of their birthday and just have 2 days every month that we do testing. And then for those people with birthdays that are in October, November, December, we'll spread them out and do their tests earlier in the year. But I'm excited to be able to do this throughout the whole year. It's been great having the entire summer to do it and into the fall. It's made things much easier, but it's going to be great, even better next year when we have 10 months to be able to get everybody tested. So really, to summarize, our two biggest benefits for bringing the program in-house was the cost savings and the flexibility. Like I mentioned, not affecting the production floor. Our employees are much happier. As I mentioned, I've done about 210 of our employees, and I really haven't heard a negative comment about the system. You've got your handful that don't care whether it was the service fan versus SHOEBOX, but I'd say 90% are raving about SHOEBOX, which is huge for us to see that kind of engagement from our team members and that kind of excitement about something new. Doesn't usually happen. So those have been our big benefits. But Alexa, I want to go ahead and throw it back to you so you can talk a little bit more about SHOEBOX solution for hearing conservation.
That's great. Thank you so much, Erin. Hearing that kind of feedback from current customers it warms my heart. It's so great. So I will take a few minutes now to give a bit more context, a bit more background on SHOEBOX Audiometry for those who aren't as familiar with us. SHOEBOX Audiometry is an end-to-end solution for occupational hearing conservation programs. Unlike other solutions, that are available today, we don't just sell a product and then move on to our next customer. We've really developed a complete package that combines products but also services that are designed to ensure that every program is a success. So when I talk about SHOEBOX, I talk about two main components. There's the iPad-based testing equipment and the web-based data management suite. So the testing equipment includes the iPad audiometer, as well as a set of calibrated audiometric headphones or transducers. And as you alluded to, Erin, earlier, the SHOEBOX system has several different testing options. So you can test in a completely automated fashion, as well as a semi-automated fashion using our new assisted mode, or in a completely manual mode. As you also mentioned, Erin, when using SHOEBOX in automated mode, the test is self-administered. But regardless of the testing mode that you're using, the typical test with SHOEBOX should take you about the same amount of time as it does with traditional equipment. As you mentioned, no sound booth is required to test with SHOEBOX, and the system does meet both OSHA and ANSI standards for audiometric testing outside of the booth. That's obviously very important when we're talking about hearing conservation programs. And all of this testing equipment, so the audiometer, the headphones, the iPad stand, everything you need to test, we put all of that together for you in a nice, lightweight, portable kit that actually weighs, less than 5 pounds, and the entire kit is the size of a shoebox. So that's where the name comes from. It's an audiometer that fits in a shoebox. Aside from testing equipment, you also have this web-based data management system. The data management system that we provide is simple, it's easy to use, it can be accessed from any web browser, and the data management tool really allows you to do everything you need to within the hearing conservation program. It allows you to upload historical results, you can set baselines, you can upload employee data, generate all kinds of reports, both for individuals and for groups. And if you are using some sort of other, EMR system or data management system internally, we do make it possible for you to export the data from SHOEBOX so that you can store it in whichever system you're using locally and use that system for further analysis or reporting. Aside from the testing equipment and the data management solution, though, what really sets SHOEBOX apart, in my opinion, is that we customize each solution for each customer. So each customer will have unique needs and requirements, and we can scale up or scale down our support services based on those requirements. So in addition to the testing equipment, the data management tools, we also offer several different support services, including training. So we're not just going to hand you this piece of equipment and expect you to know how to use it. We will provide you with training, deployment assistance. Every SHOEBOX system includes annual calibration service. as well as mobile device management, as well as fleet management, I should mention, for our enterprise customers. We also offer things like audiological consultation services, which could be, review of audiometric results, but also review of your protocol. So do you need help or guidance building a program? We can offer those types of services. And, all that to say, SHOEBOX Audiometry really is a turnkey solution, in my opinion. We can customize this solution to meet your needs, whether you're a small, independent business or you're a multinational organization with sites all over the globe. It really is such a flexible solution that it can be molded to your requirements. So, to wrap up here, I'd like to leave with, just emphasizing the fact that SHOEBOX Audiometry is much more than an audiometer. It's a solution, and behind every shoebox, there's a team of professionals there or here to support your hearing conservation program. Our goal is really to ensure that you're not simply running a program that, meets OSHA requirements. Our goal is to help you run a program that's best in class and one that guarantees the health and well-being of all those that it impacts. So before I open up the floor to questions, I did want to just share with you some of the companies that we currently work with, that we've helped make the switch to SHOEBOX. And this is just a small sample. Today, SHOEBOX is being used in over 40 countries. And in the U.S. alone, we're working with approximately 150 hearing conservation customers. Again, we work with companies of all sizes. These are some of the big names, but again, we work with small independent organizations as well. And with that, I'd like to open up the floor to questions.
Perfect. Thank you both very much. Very nice job giving us all the pros of using this system. I think your presentation was excellent. And we do have a number of questions that have come in. I want to tell everybody who's watching this webinar there's still time to submit a question, and please do so if you have one. But we'll turn now to the Q&A portion of the webinar. Here's a good starting question. I guess it would be for both of you. Do Onsite Innovations and SHOEBOX help to establish hearing conservation and medical surveillance programs for employers who don't have one yet need one?
Erin, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Great. Thank you, Alexa. So from an Onsite Innovations standpoint, we really try to support our clients through clinical management of onsite health and regulatory compliance. We have a variety of different clinicians. So yes, I'm an athletic trainer, and I specialize a lot in musculoskeletal injuries, but we also hire EMTs, nurse practitioners, physician assistants. It just really depends on what that client needs. So our clinicians are well-trained with background in health and safety and OSHA surveillance programs like hearing conservation, and we help with policy development, reporting, and programs to try to reduce exposure. And we find great partners like SHOEBOX that help us take things to the next level. So that's kind of the on-site side of things, and I'll hand it over to Alexa to talk about SHOEBOX.
Yeah, and that's great, Erin. I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation today that at SHOEBOX, we love partnering with companies like Onsite Innovations because they're forward-thinking, they're innovative, they approach every customer program from such an innovative and holistic approach. What I will add to Erin's response is that our specialty is really audiology or audiometry. So we can fill in maybe some of the blanks from a strictly audiometric standpoint. So we do have an audiological team on staff that can provide guidance from that perspective. So it's great working with companies like Onsite Innovations and people like Erin to round out that solution.
Very good. Thank you both. I guess this must be for Erin. So a pretty good question, I think. Where do you do the testing? Do you have a dedicated space, or do you just use an empty office or meeting room?
So the answer is yes to all of those. We've got a couple offices that aren't utilized on a regular basis. We kind of have them available for visitors, and they're quiet. However, we also have 2 conference rooms that are very quiet as well. So I kind of use any of those spaces. We've found all of them are below the you know, standard threshold noise level, and so we can use a variety of different spaces that are in our front office area. Obviously, we have some break rooms and stuff that are out on the plant floor, and those are just a little too loud. It'd be great to bring it closer to our employees, but we really do keep it more front office.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. A good one for you, Alexa. Someone asks, can you import baselines from the truck service, and how do you establish baselines for new employees? I guess it's really for both of you.
Sure, I can start with that one. That's great. So the data management tool that SHOEBOX offers allows for CSV import. So very easy to import historical results, and that's something that we do cover with our customers during your initial training session. Obviously, it would be first asking, do you have electronic records of your baseline audiograms? And if so, we'll work with you to do an import of that data. We can also do that manually. So if you were, for example, previously using only paper-based records, which surprisingly many people still are using paper-based record-keeping systems, but if that is the case, we can also help you by doing a manual entry of data into our system. And then I guess the third option is we also offer this as a service, so the data entry as a service as well. But long story short, very easy to import historical results and assign those results as baselines. Now, you can't import more than just the baseline. So for most of my customers, if they have employees that have been with their organization, let's say 10 years, and they have maybe 12 or so audiograms for each of those individuals, they may want to import all of that data into SHOEBOX, and that's easy as well. We don't cap the volume of data you can bring into our system. We try to make it as easy as possible to not only import, but then also export the data, as you see fit.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we were able to do all of ours from the service van, and we had some of our 230 employees had, 30 previous tests, and there was no problem in importing that information over to SHOEBOX. So.
Okay, perfect. Someone just, since you just mentioned the 230 employees, somebody I guess just wanted to have it reconfirmed. How many employees does your company have, and how many shifts?
So I would say, we have about a total of 280 employees at the site. 230 roughly fall into our hearing conservation program. So the other 50 are primarily front office or work in office environments. But so far, I've got to do follow-ups on, so I've done 110 tests this year, and I need to do follow-up tests on about 10 people. So not too bad. We'll do the follow-ups, and then from there we'll go to the next step of a work-related questionnaire if needed. So.
Perfect.
So Erin, can you maybe just elaborate a bit on, because I remember when we first started talking, you were explaining the scheduling process for your particular plant and how complicated it was. So it's a 24-hour operation, is that correct?
So we kind of, yes and no. Half of two-thirds of our departments work on a traditional 5-by-8 schedule, Monday through Friday, first, second, and third shift. But we do have 1.5 of our departments, which is about, I'd say, 25 people on each shift now, or crew, that are 24/7, and they work 5 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. and then 5 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and they work 4 on, 4 off. So that's where things got particularly challenging with scheduling with the van, on top of trying to make sure that I didn't schedule too many people from one department to where it would affect their run strategy or their ability to run. And then inevitably, a week before testing would happen, I'd have to go back because people change departments or people are now on vacation or whatever. And so it was a revamping of the schedule like every week for about a month and a half leading up to the testing. So it was not the easiest process. I enjoy this one much more.
I can certainly understand that. Thank you. Very good answer, both of you. Here's a good one. The questionnaire asks, how do you perform the annual training requirement for hearing conservation that OSHA requires? Currently, our mobile unit shows a training video before the testing, the person added.
So for this year, we are putting it as one of our monthly trainings, and we actually had a copy of that video. We still partner with our mobile service van because from a corporate standpoint, they manage our data. So we still have to submit our tests to them because that's just a corporate process. So we do have a copy of the video, and that's what we show. We had to show it for anyone who missed the tests before, so anyone who was sick or on vacation or missed their appointment, and we had to send them out to the clinic, we would have to show them the video to meet that need. But I'm actually currently working on revamping the training. I've done some hearing conservation trainings, and I feel like there's some really good information that I want to pass on to our employees. So probably in 2019, that's going to be something that we change. But for this year, we figured just rolling out SHOEBOX was enough of a change, and we'll do the revamp of training in 2019.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I can piggyback on that response as well, because actually the part of hearing conservation that I'm actually most passionate about is the training, and I think that's just simply a result of having or being able to work with so many different organizations that have various ways of delivering the training component required by OSHA. So one of the best programs I've seen so far, they've really found a way to make use of the iPad, the technology, putting the iPad in the employee's hand. And what they do, they have quite a robust library of video training material. So they obviously have to go through, the employee will go through an initial training program that includes hearing conservation components at time of employment. But then on an annual basis, they do what they call a 5-minute refresh training. And so they can show that 5-minute refresh video immediately following the audiometric exam. So they actually show the video on the iPad itself, and they're using that iPad for multiple purposes, which I absolutely love to see. Is one of the great things about SHOEBOX is that the iPad doesn't need to be a dedicated device. It can be used for other things. So take advantage of the technology and what it's capable of, and use it to do things like bolster your training component of the hearing conservation program.
That's very useful. Good answer. Thank you. Someone posted this question. I think it's a very good one. Does OSHA recognize this as equivalent to traditional audiometry testing booths?
I can answer that one. So you're testing my memory here, but the short answer is yes. SHOEBOX meets both OSHA and ANSI requirements for audiometric testing outside of a booth. I believe the relevant piece of OSHA is 29 CFR 1910.95. I could be wrong on that. The important pieces to remember, well, I guess the way that I explain it to my customers is that SHOEBOX audiometry is in fact used in many different environments. That includes clinical environments. It includes, research-based environments. So we take regulatory compliance very, very seriously. We're in regular communication with both OSHA and ANSI, organizations like KAOC, very regular and open communication or dialogue between our regulatory teams, our audiological teams. Every time that we make updates or changes to the system, we're doing those with an awareness that those need to also meet these standards. So for anyone who's on the call currently, I would be more than happy to provide documentation to discuss the regulatory compliance piece. We actually built a really helpful piece of documentation this year that breaks down the OSHA standard. Again, anyone who's read the OSHA standard knows that it can be, it can be complicated and confusing. And so we've tried to simplify that for you and have created a document that breaks down the relevant components of the OSHA standard and then explains and clarifies how SHOEBOX meets the standard or all the relevant pieces of the standard. So again, we take regulatory compliance very seriously, particularly in the occupational health space, and I would be happy to discuss that in greater detail with anyone who has follow-up questions.
Perfect, thank you. Here's a very good question. The person writes, we have specific seasons where we hire 1,000 plus workers and need to give them audiograms. Is there a possibility for renting the iPad units and then manually transferring data into an existing database, or does it all have to come as a full product, iPad, database, etc.?
That's a good question. I do work with many organizations that have asked me about, how do we manage the temporary worker situation? The first thing I can say is that we typically do not rent our systems. There is quite a lot of time and resources that go into every SHOEBOX system, from the license provision to calibration, logistics on our side. So, we would prefer to work with you on an ongoing basis. Again, we can customize the systems to meet each customer's requirements. From a data management side, there's ways to activate, deactivate patients or employee files. So what I would say for this question is, let's have a conversation maybe offline where I can explain, different options. We do have things like month-to-month term contracts available. But ultimately what I've found is that once you start using the system, it's hard to part with it because you get so accustomed to having the flexibility and ease of use that the system affords you. And I've found that my customers that start off in this situation end up being some of my longest standing customers. So let's take that one offline, and I'm happy to have that conversation, in more detail and lay out a few different scenarios for you.
Okay, very good, thank you. This one just came in. If there is an STS and the employee needs a new baseline, do you have the staff certified to change baselines?
That's an interesting question. So we have the tools to change a baseline. So it's very easy in our data management suite to update for the administrator, I should say. So there's varying degrees of permissions. So as an administrator of a system, you could update the baseline for one or both ears. That being said, that would fall under the responsibility of a program supervisor. So if we are not the program supervisor, then we would not be the one updating that baseline. Okay, so that's an OSHA requirement. So I would need to know what or who fulfilled the program supervisor role for this particular environment to be able to answer that question. From a strictly technology standpoint, yes, you can modify baselines in our data management suite. But who does that? Who uses that tool to update the baseline? That's the real question. So without knowing that, it's difficult for me to provide an answer to that question.
Okay, very good. And very comprehensive answer. What kinds of records or reports can you produce for employees?
Great question. So there's a number of different reports that we can generate. Obviously the most basic of which is the audiogram. And the audiogram can be accessed either through the iPad. So at the end of the test, you have the ability to either email or print that audiogram directly from the iPad, or you can always access any audiogram from our data management portal. Next, you have what we call an individual summary report, which could give you a complete picture of one individual's hearing health history. That could include things like a questionnaire or the results from a questionnaire. It can include the most recent audiogram plus a complete record of all previous audiograms. Then, of course, it would have things like places for signature by the examiner, by the patient, things like that. To me, that individual summary report is the one I see used most often. It's the document that my customers, in most cases, will provide to the employee. But it also becomes relevant if you are referring an employee out to, say, an audiologist or ENT for further analysis or examination. It's a great document to provide them with that they can then pass to the medical professional to provide them with more context than just simply the audiogram. The audiogram only gives you, part of the picture, right? So the individual summary report is probably the report that I see used most often and the one that you would provide to the employee. From an employer standpoint, we have a whole list of group-based reports that you can access that would allow the employer to do things like, trend analysis, rapid identification of those employees that have shifts versus, the results for an entire department or team or site, let's say. So all of the reports that we offer can be customized. You can customize the fields that are present, the presentation of the reports. They can be branded with your logo and company information. The reporting that SHOEBOX offers currently, I would say, is one of my favorite features and ones that I get feedback on most from my customers. But I'll also say that we're adding new reports, on an, I would say, quarterly basis. So every quarter, as we release an update to the system, more and more options are being added to our reporting abilities. And I will also say, lastly, that all of the new features, all of the new reporting functionality is based on customer feedback. So some of the most exciting developments I've seen in the last year are direct reflection of customer feedback that I received from one particular customer that had great ideas and who, actually diagrammed some ideas for reports for us, and we took it to our, software developers, and they said, that's a great idea. And that's one of the, the beautiful things about a software-based product is that it evolves. It develops over time. It changes. It improves. And in this case, it really is improving based on the feedback we've received from our customers.
Very good. Thank you. I guess this one's for you, Erin. I think it is anyway. How many technicians would it take to test 230 employees per year?
Like I said, it's primarily been me doing it, although we do have our two other safety team members who are trained to be able to do it. So really it takes us about, I schedule people in 20-minute blocks, but it really takes about 10 minutes to actually go through that. We just have a questionnaire that they fill out beforehand, and then it takes me a couple minutes just to walk them through how to use it. Really it can be, 230 people can be done by one person, even with the other responsibilities that I have. So.
Okay, very good answer. Thank you. And a natural follow-up, I think. How did you find a space quiet enough to test in a manufacturing plant?
Like I said, we have, a front office area where our finance team and planners sit. So it is quiet enough up here. We, tested it. I did a trial run test on myself to make sure it didn't go above any limits, and it didn't in each one of the rooms that we use. So, yeah, it's not too difficult to find a quiet enough place. At least here it's not.
All right, good answer. I appreciate that. I think maybe for Alexa, although it could be for both of you, how long does it take to complete a test? You mentioned about 10 minutes. Is that really about the average?
Yeah, so what we found as an average, and keep in mind that it will vary based on the individual, and it will also vary. What I've found the biggest differentiator what determines the length of the test, in my opinion, is the training that we provide to our customers and making sure that they're equipped with the tools to provide clear, concise instructions to the patient before testing. So what we've found is the average test takes 30 seconds per frequency per ear. So for a 7-frequency test, which is what we do for the OSHA test, 5 to 8 minutes is what we've seen on average. Add, a couple more minutes on top of that to allow for instruction. And I do really stress the instruction because You know, I've seen it where I've had a customer, you know, say, here's what you do, you touch this button and, you know, good luck. And those tests maybe are less successful. Where we see, you know, clear, concise instructions presented, we've also developed this year some really great, you know, startup guides and documents that you can actually have in hard copy right next to the iPad that helps the patient if they stumble in terms of how the test works. But really, all factors considered, you know, even considering those who may or may not be familiar with iPad technology, maybe have never even used an iPad before, 5 to 8 minutes is the consistent average length of a test. So 30 seconds per frequency, per ear, very safe estimate. Add on another 2 minutes or so for instruction, and like Erin said, you get to about 10 minutes.
Okay, very good. Pretty basic question. How do you know if an employee has had a recordable shift?
Do you want to take that one, Erin, or do you want me to?
So for us, I kind of review ours just to give myself an idea ahead of time. However, again, we do still submit our data to the company that we used as a service van before, because they do manage the data and they do have an audiologist review everything. So that's, you know, usually I'll submit all the tests I did for a week on a Friday, and usually by the following Thursday or Friday I can go back in and see if anybody needs, whether they were recordable or a non-recordable STS, we still retest anybody that has any STS. So that's kind of how we manage it on our end. But I believe through SHOEBOX's data management system, you can also identify it that way, but I will pass that to you later.
You got it, Erin. So one thing I should have mentioned earlier, so as part of the data management suite, we have all these, you know, various reports that you can generate, and it's all automated. And one of the reports you can generate is a shift report. So you can generate reports to give you everyone's results. So let's say, you know, you've gone into a site, you wanted to test all 230 people on the site and have a summary report of all of those results. You can do that. You can also generate a report that says, okay, show me only those people. So of the 230, let's say 10% of them are going to have a shift of some sort. Show me a report that only gives me those people and what their results were and what the shift was. Okay, so you can have reports that are customized to meet whatever needs you have, and it's all automated. And again, it's part of your basic training that we provide is, okay, what are the types of reports that you're looking for? Let me show you how to generate those.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We've got a couple more questions. Someone simply asked, is this the same company as Onsite Innovations in New Jersey?
Yes, it is. So our corporate headquarters is in New Jersey. I am at one of our client locations in Illinois, outside of Chicago. But yeah, same company.
Okay, very good. One more. Would you recommend testing everyone over the course of a week or month, or use a rolling cycle based on some other date, like hire date or birth date or something?
Well, like I said, we kind of have been doing it this year just primarily by department and shift. So, like, you know, this week I've been doing first shift packaging. Next week I'll do first shift processing and so on. But like I said, I think next year we're going to kind of do it where there's like 2 days out of each month that we test, and I'm just going to do everybody who has a birthday during that month during those 2 days. And then once a quarter, I'll have like a makeup session for anyone who maybe wasn't there on those 2 days that I tested. So I think that'll just make it a little bit easier and more manageable, so that I'm able to take on my other responsibilities and just have a couple days dedicated towards hearing each month. So.
Yeah, and I'll echo that, Erin. So as I mentioned, you know, I work with many different organizations of varying sizes, and I would say, you know, once you get to a certain size of organization, the vast majority of my customers move to this rolling cycle model, simply because it's less disruptive to their business operations. So again, as Erin, you know, went through earlier in the presentation, bringing trying to cram, let's say, 200 tests into a few days, incredibly disruptive, and that's where you run into all of these kind of hidden costs or, soft costs associated with this type of program. If you can do it, based on whatever it may be, hire date, birth date. Birth date is actually the one I see most commonly, but it just becomes much less intrusive or much less disruptive to the regular flow of business. And I see some of my customers will, piggyback on, say, a regularly scheduled training session or another appointment that they may have, so that they can only, pull, let's say, 4 or 5 people a day off the floor to have them do their tests versus 4 or 5 people an hour kind of thing. So I definitely would say that organizations of a certain size are moving more and more towards this rolling cycle to get away from this, incredibly disruptive process of having the lineup outside the van during business hours.
That's a very helpful answer. Thank you both. We have gotten to the end of the questions. I want to tell everybody who on this webinar that the questions that we haven't had time to answer, the folks at SHOEBOX will receive all of those, and we'll be getting back to answer the ones that have not been answered during this Q&A by email once the call is finished. So thank you for submitting all that you have. I just want to thank our audience for today's webinar, and also both speakers, Alexa Goff and Aaron Beatty, for just an excellent presentation. And also thank today's sponsor, SHOEBOX Audiometry. Remember, everyone, in the next day or two, we will be emailing you a link to an archived version of this webinar so you can review it or pass it along to your colleagues. We hope you'll do that. Thank you very much for attending, and this concludes today's webinar.